Okay, we want to be on time today. It's a very packed presentation. We have an amazing presenter today. So welcome everyone. I'm Raj Rasasingham. I'm the CPD Director for the Department of Psychiatry. So welcome to our citywide grand rounds. Um, Before we begin, let me start with our land acknowledgement. I would like to begin with an acknowledgement of the land on which we work, study, and live. Before I read it, I want you to take a moment to situate yourself and think about the land under and around you. We recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which the sites, the Department of Psychiatry, are located and precede the establishment of the University of Toronto. We acknowledge our presence on the traditional treaties of many Indigenous nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Anishinaabe, and the Chippewa and the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat people. Today, this land is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to live, work, and gather on these territories. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississauga and Chippewa bands. Since this event is a virtual gathering, a singular land acknowledgement does not fully capture the richness of our distribution across many locations. There are few places on earth that someone before us has not called home. So thank you. As I said, we have a wonderful presentation by Dr. Nebo, and I will let Dr. Russell do the introduction. There will be an evaluation link sent at the end, so please fill it out, and we always appreciate your feedback. The next Citywide Side Grand Rounds in September, so thank you for supporting our Grand Rounds. I also want to acknowledge Anne-Marie Razwan and our IT team, Melissa and DC Commons. So thank you. Without further ado, if we are going to move to Dr. Jennifer Russell, who is the Chief of Psychiatry at Michael Garron Hospital, our co-host, to do a welcome and introduction. Go ahead, Dr. Russell.
Thank you so much, Raj. It gives me absolute pleasure and delight to introduce our guest speaker today, Dr. Gil Adler-Nebo. And I think this topic is particularly relevant today, and we're fortunate enough at Michael Garron to hear this earlier in the fall. The title of Understanding the Essence of Childhood Trauma, a Compassionate Approach to Pediatric PTSD in Today's World is really a topic that couldn't be more relevant. Dr. Gil Adler-Nebo is a child psychiatrist who initially trained in Israel before moving to Canada in 2003, where she completed a fellowship in child and adolescent anxiety disorders at the Hospital for Sick Children. She has a special apprentice in trauma therapy from the University of Pennsylvania under the mentorship of Dr. Edna Foa, where she adapted prolonged exposure therapy for pediatric populations. And currently, she's the head of our anxiety disorder clinic in our child and adolescent department. She's also an assistant professor at U of T. She has over 2 decades of experience working with anxious youth. Dr. Adler-Nebo views anxiety as a pivotal precursor to other psychiatric disorders and a root cause of life challenges, including things such as social isolation, disruptions in education and work. She passionately believes that early intervention not only alleviates immediate distress, but has the power to transform a child's, and I will say family's life as well, Gilly, fostering resilience and long-term well-being. Certainly, I've had the honor of getting to know Gilly this year as a colleague, and I'd say as a friend as well. And the learning objectives I think we'll all get out of today are appreciating the relationship between developmental stages and the emergence of trauma reactions, and specifically PTSD in children, understanding the core aspects of trauma and the connection to childhood PTSD, and exploring the impact of current events on children and adolescents in relation to trauma, including strategies for prevention and intervention. Gilly, it's an honor to have you again today, and I look forward to hearing you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen, and thank you, Raj. I'll just share my screen. Just a second. Okay, yes, and I really want to say that the system that we work in is important, and it trickles down, and it's so important for us to have a supportive system and collegial like we have at Michael Garron Hospital. Okay, so today we're going to talk about pediatric PTSD in today's context. And so we're going to talk about the essence of PTSD. We're going to talk about PTSD through a developmental perspective, so the essence of children, if you'd like. We're going to put all this in today's context, and the trauma that I see today in my mind is the spread of war, beginning with Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And then we're going to talk about what we can do about it. So the essence of PTSD. I don't know about you, but I love Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, and you can find a lot of wisdom in children's books. And this is a quote I actually go by. It's a paraphrase on an old British saying. The old British saying is, take care of the pence and the pounds will take care of themselves, which I think is about being cheap. But Lewis Carroll's paraphrase is actually the exact opposite. If you understand and take care of the essence, the details will follow. It's similar to Occam's razor, if you know it, if you wish, you can look it up. So let's start by understanding the essence of PTSD. And I'd like to start with a story that I heard from Paul Gilbert. I do recommend, I'll have a reading list at the end, so I do recommend reading his work. I heard him at a conference. He spoke about a patient of his who was in her mid-30s when she saw him for therapy. But she recounted the story as if it was yesterday. Let's say her name was Sarah. So Sarah told him about an incident that happened when she was in elementary school in art class. They were doing embroidery, and the teacher was walking between the aisles. And when she got to her, she stooped down and said, "Wow, that's amazing embroidery." And it really was nice. And then the teacher went to the front of the class and whispered to her assistant, "How does she do that with her chubby little fingers?" So I think we can all feel the pain. And it's such a simple moment. I'm sure something similar has happened to all of us. It's not a type A trauma. It's not PTSD, but it does include two things that I think are important for trauma. One, it's a very emotional moment. And two, it's a moment that has a special meaning for the person experiencing it. And both, in my opinion, are the essence of trauma. So let's now try to understand the traumatic reaction through theory. I chose to bring two theories to help us understand. The first is Lang's bioinformational theory. It proposes that emotions are made up of two components, a cognitive component, informational processing, and a physiological component, the bodily response. And according to this theory, emotional responses are generated by the interaction between the cognitive representations of the emotion and the physiological arousal. Lang first raised the theory in the 1970s, but as you can see from the reference, it's still relevant and supported by neuroimaging studies today. So here we talk about a fear structure. It's a theoretical representation of the stimuli, the response, and their meaning. And the meaning is the thing that glues the fear structure together. And I'll give you a couple of examples about the importance of the meaning. So imagine running with someone running after you with a stick. Imagine that the stick is a baton and you know the person running after you is a runner in a relay race. What are you feeling? So hold that. Now imagine that the person running after you is a murderer with a bat. What are you feeling now? The meaning of the stimuli is what changed the whole fear structure for you. I'll give you another example. Imagine you're shooting at a range. God knows why you're shooting at a range, but you're shooting at a range and there's somebody shooting next to you. And suddenly that person turns around and points the gun at you, at your face. What are you feeling now? Can you feel your heart starting to pound? So the moment just immediately changed for you because of the meaning. The meaning that glues the fear structure together can be realistic or unrealistic. And as long as the fear structure isn't accessed or modified by new information, it stays intact. This diagram is adapted from Faux and Kozak's 1986 article. Here you can see the red ovals are the stimulus, the blue rhomboids are the response, the full lines are realistic thoughts, and the dotted lines are unrealistic thoughts or cognitive distortions, as we call them. They can be, as we know, about the world is dangerous, people can't be trusted, about the self, I am incompetent, PTSD symptoms are a sign of weakness, somebody else would have coped with it better, or a sign of thoughts about the future, the future is hopeless. And I took the liberty of modifying FOA's diagram for the purpose of this talk. So here you can see in the red ovals, there's a child at home with their parents. It's dark. There are missiles outside, and there are men in uniform shooting with guns. You can see in the full lines, the realistic thought that missiles and men shooting with guns clearly are dangerous. But is every man in uniform dangerous? Is every Arab dangerous? Is every Jew dangerous? Are the child and their parents incompetent? I don't think so. So the second theory that I wanted to raise is from neurophysiology. If you look at the brain anatomy, as we all know, these are the three major players in PTSD: the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex. The amygdala plays a role in emotional or implicit memory and processing. The hippocampus is involved in the formation and consolidation of episodic or contextual memory. This is also called explicit or declarative memory. These are the plain facts. So in a way, the hippocampus creates a cognitive map which places memories in place and time and makes them autobiographical. The prefrontal cortex is involved in cognitive processes like decision-making, impulse control, emotion regulation, and for our purposes, it's involved in conscious thought and meaning-making. This is a simplified schematic model from Joseph Ledoux's book, Anxious, which will be in your reading list as well. As you can see, the sensory processing areas of the cortex receive input from external events, and this information is shuttled into the thalamus, which is the sort of relay station that creates perceptual representations of the stimuli and sends them for further processing to the hippocampus. And the hippocampus then communicates with the cortex, and the information travels back and forth, back and forth, back and forth over years until it's consolidated in the cortex and the hippocampus is no longer needed for this memory and can let go. So far we are talking about the declarative memory, the facts. Now, if the amygdala is turned on, and that happens partly due to adrenaline, then an emotional or implicit memory is created. And this connection between the hippocampus and the amygdala doesn't occur, doesn't need to be conscious. It can happen below the cortical level. We know that the brain is formed in a use-dependent manner, so it's a different way to say use it or lose it. It's all about neuroplasticity. And to famously quote Donald Hebb, neurons that fire together wire together. And so a neural circuit, which is often used, will only be used more and be the default, and a circuit that isn't often used will fall by the sideway. So this means that an emotional memory, which is not necessarily conscious and isn't processed, can become entrenched. Joseph Ledoux uses the phrase high road to describe circuits that travel through the cortex and low road to describe the circuits that are subconscious. And this is important for two reasons. One, the amygdala is part of the limbic system and is considered the reptilian brain. And that's a part that acts quickly without conscious consideration. And the second thing is that an emotionally arousing memory is very powerful and remains etched in our memory long after the declarative memory for facts is forgotten. So the essence of PTSD, first we need an event, a DSM type A trauma. It's an event that is etched in memory by strong emotion through the amygdala. It's personally salient. It's incorporated into the autobiographical context and becomes meaningful. And so a trauma is a very powerful learning experience, and it may, if new experiences don't override it, become entrenched. Let's now understand the essence of children. Okay, so I'd like to approach it from two directions. One, how development affects children's response to trauma. So how development affects the PTSD symptoms themselves. And the other way around, how traumatic experiences affect development. So bottom up and top down, if you'd like. Very simple task for the couple of minutes that Raj gave me. So how does development affect trauma? The amygdala is well developed at birth, a long time before the hippocampus completes its development. And so early traumatic experiences, for example, can leave their memory traces in the amygdala as sort of emotional memories, a long time before the declarative memories catch up, sort of when the hippocampus becomes online. So the resulting experience would be an emotional response of anxiety without the cognitive memory of its trigger or verbal explanation. And there's a famous example of a person who felt sympathetic reaction like heart palpitations, sweating every time they heard a car honk. And it turns out that they were in an accident where the driver fell on the steering wheel and the car honked and the person wasn't conscious, they didn't remember, but their body remembered. I'll give you another example that actually happened to me in my office. I saw a kid for therapy with his parents, a kindergartner. And on my coffee table, there was a book about a kid who was hospitalized, a picture book with a picture of an infusion. And the kid said, that happened to me. And the parents were flabbergasted because it did actually happen to him. He was hospitalized with sick kids, but he was one and he didn't have language yet. And it wasn't something that they talked about at all. So they really, they were blown away from the fact that he remembered that. What about the high road? We know that the cortex, along with abstract thinking and other cognitive capabilities, develop slowly over years. We also know that children take time to develop socially. They are naturally egocentric in the sense that they seem to think that the world revolves around them. And children are attached and dependent on their caregivers for meaning making. And this is good and bad. On the one hand, children are not affected by and can't remember things that they can't understand. And so even if there's a war raging around them, if the immediate surroundings are safe and stable, they're not necessarily affected. We also know that the brain is plastic and children can be extremely resilient and flexible. So for example, I remember where I was during the Yom Kippur War. I was 5, so I'm dating myself here. If you know when the Yom Kippur War was, you know how old I am. And my parents and I were visiting the house that would later become our home, but it wasn't fully built then. And then we heard the sirens of the war. And my parents took me quickly into the house that wasn't fully built for protection. And after the sirens ended, we got into the car and went home. And I felt the excitement and tension in the air, but I had no clue that there's a war or that the country I'm living in is in danger of actual annihilation. And it didn't affect me one little bit. But on the other hand, and here we're delving into the territory of top down or how trauma affects development, if the trauma touched the child directly, or their caregivers, or the meaning making of adults around them, we know that it can change the life trajectory and even personality. We are meaning making animals, and it is harder to make sense of the world around us and cope when you're not fully cognitively developed. And so children are more prone to engage in maladaptive coping mechanisms like complete avoidance, complete shutting down, or the opposite, acting out, or even mimicking the aggressor. So the role of any adult in a child's life during war is even more important than usual. Most studies regarding the effects of trauma and the psychological development of children relate to ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and ongoing abuse and neglect, which you're probably more familiar with. And Bowlby's attachment theory is crucial to understanding the effect of neglect or abuse on the individual child. And this will affect their identity formation and their ability to create trusting relationships. But what happens when the trauma is societal? And here I'd like to bring up Albert Bandura's social learning theory, which emphasizes the importance of observational learning and modeling in shaping behavior. The narrative on both sides of the border right now in the Middle East, I'm talking about now, Gaza and Israel, is unhelpful for child development. In Israel, the narrative is more or less this: we were butchered during the pogroms and murdered during the Holocaust. It is now happening all over again. We are eternal victims, even in our safe place. We have to fight back. And the narrative in Gaza is: we were driven away from our land during the Nakba, and it is now happening all over again. It is genocide. We have to fight back. So on both sides of the border, the pain now is palpable, the emotions are high, and we know that when emotions are high, that low road, that reptilian brain takes over. It's harder for us to think complex cortical thoughts, and we huddle together with our own tribe for comfort. And this is understandable. The simplest meaning making, the default explanation, is to portray the other as evil. And this makes the solution simple: fight back, but it also perpetuates the cycle of violence. I'd like to introduce now and recommend this little known book that Aaron Beck wrote. And I hope everybody knows who Aaron Beck is. And again, this is on our reading list. So he wrote this in 1999. It's called Prisoners of Hate. And I'd like to read a couple of excerpts from it. So a relatively brief thought can produce a profound emotion. We know that from CBT. Ideas of being wronged by somebody else produce anger and a desire for retaliation. The aggressors have a positive bias regarding themselves and a negative bias toward their adversary. Once an individual becomes aroused to fight, all of his senses are focused on the enemy. Although these individuals or groups may feel liberated from restraints against attacking the supposed adversary, such people have actually surrendered their freedom of choice, abdicated the rationality, and are now the prisoners of a primal thinking mechanism. So here we encounter that low road that we spoke about again, that reptilian brain, and that primal mechanism is hate. The other is put into a frame, a myth, a cognitive distortion or thinking trap of overgeneralization. And I'll continue reading with your permission. In ethnic, national, or international conflict, myths about the enemy are propagated, giving the image further dimension. The leaders of a nation, taking their country into war, may have a sober view of the enemy. The war of conquest does not require that the leaders actually hate their opponents, but military action is more likely to succeed when the soldiers and the civilian population view their opponents as the evil to be destroyed. A military adventure may be a political gamble for the leaders of the government, but it is a life or death encounter for the soldiers who see their personal sacrifices as actions of heroism. So to summarize, Aaron Beck, leaders who want to go into war for political gain elicit the primal cognitive distortion of black and white thinking and overgeneralization and the primal emotion of hate in their nation to accomplish their goal. Their end justifies their means, and we all fall into that trap. This is another book that speaks to the same point. It was written by General Klaus von Clausewitz. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Clausewitz was an important Prussian general and the director of the Prussian War College in the mid-19th century. So mid-19th century, a long time ago. He created a rational model for understanding war, which is still considered the dominant military theory today, as far as I can understand. And of course, I'm really not an expert in this. I took this from Yuval Noah Harari's book, Nexus, which I also recommend. So the most important maxim from Clausewitz's theory is that war is the continuation of policy by other means. okay? So this implies that the war is not something inevitable. It's not a heroic adventure. It's not even a military phenomenon. It's a political tool. So this means that war is premeditated, cold-blooded murder, not of one, not of dozens, not of hundreds, not of thousands, but of tens of hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people. War is a means to an end, to a political end. And these photos are of regular people from war-afflicted areas worldwide. Some we know are dead, some are hostages, some were just displaced and their house ruined. Some we know nothing about, but what we do know is that none of them deserve this. And I'd like to zoom in for a second and look at some of the people who were affected by this war. I gave a very similar talk at Psychiatric Dimensions of Disaster almost exactly a year ago. And this year it's just next week on June 7th. So you still have time to register if you want. And at that time, Hirsch Goldberg Polin, the person here, was still alive. And we thought that Shiri Ariel and Kfir Bibas were still alive. They were not, but the world thought they were. Hirsch Goldberg Polin was at the Nova Music Festival on October 7th, and he took shelter with other people who escaped the festival, about 30 other people in a bunker against missiles. But the problem that day wasn't missiles. And Hamas militants threw grenades into the bunker with a lot of people in it. And Hirsch and his best friend Aner, who had already completed the army, they had been soldiers, and theoretically they knew what to do when the grenade is thrown at you. They caught the grenades with their bare hands. Can you imagine? A regular person who was at a festival now catching grenades with their bare hands. And Aner, his friend, managed to throw out of the bunker to protect the other people, maybe 7 or 8 grenades before he was killed. And Hirsch's hand blew off at the elbow. And then the Hamas terrorists who were outside called for the people who were still alive to come out, and they were taken hostage. And I'd like to show you a video from his mom, Rachel Goldberg Polin, who I also really recommend to hear what she's an incredible woman. This was before he was killed.
Because today is Mother's Day, I decided to read to you this letter that I wrote to Hirsch the night before he turned 3 years old. So it was back in 2003. And bear with me because it's going to take a few minutes. See if you can handle it. To my very sweetest Hirsch, tomorrow you will turn 3 years old. The past days have been so emotional for me. Every time I turn around, I am crying. Last night I walked into your room and watched you sleeping next to your teddy bear, and you were wearing your blue pajamas with the feet in. I gently touched your long, soft, curly hair that we will cut for the first time in a few more days. I went back into my room and I cried and cried. Dada just looked at me and then he got up to go look at you himself. He came back in and he said, "There will be many more of these." All that kept going through my mind were the words to a Yiddish lullaby I heard years ago. Your mother will cry 1,000 tears before you grow to be a man. Hirsch, these last 3 years have been the most challenging and best years of my life. Nothing can begin to describe my love for you. One day when you have children, and I can't even fathom that now, you will know this kind of so much more than love. You are my baby. My ultimate goal as a parent is to help you become a confident, self-sufficient, and independent person. But that means you won't need me. And that, I think, is what is causing my heart to ache so much right now. I want to raise you to become a healthy person of the world, but it feels like in order to do that, I have to go counter to what I feel deep inside. I don't want to let you go. And all of this when you are only 3. Time moves so quickly. To understand this, one only needs to look at one's children. The days fly by, and before I know it, we will be taking you to college. I can't imagine what a basket case I will be then. I wish this could all go more slowly. I treasure each and every moment I spend with you. I am so blessed that it scares me. What did Dada and I do to get so lucky to have you? It must have been something amazing. A new chapter in your life is beginning. You are really changing from a toddler into a little boy. You just started preschool, and we'll be switching you to a bed soon, and Sunday we will cut your adorable hair. I wish you the best of everything this world has to offer: love, happiness, laughter, kindness, success. But most of all, I wish for you a child like yourself who will bring to you all the light and delight that you have brought to me. Happiest third birthday, my sweet son. May God bless you and keep you. May God shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May God lift up his countenance toward you and give you peace. I love you to bits, Mama. First, thank you for making me a mother. I love you. Stay strong. Survive.
I've seen this video so many times and it still brings tears to my eyes. So I'd like to show you another video. This is a video of her after his death. He was almost a year hostage.
He was standing when he was first shot. He has a bullet wound. A bullet went through his right hand, his only hand, into his shoulder, into his neck, that came out the side of his head. Then they think that he collapsed. And then he was shot in the back of the head against his head, and the bullet came out of the top of his head. And we know that because there's so much gunpowder in his hair. When he was found 2 days later. He was still on his knees. Sort of, remember, it was such a narrow corridor. And one of the young women had her head resting on his side, on his lap. And she had also been shot. These people were emaciated and bullet-ridden and filthy. They said they hadn't showered in months.
Going back to Hirsch for a moment.
So it takes so long and so much love and psychological mindedness and understanding to raise a loving and compassionate human being, and just a moment of thoughtless, cruel violence to take that life away. Regarding the Bibas family, we don't have time, but there's so many videos online of these cute redheads dressed up as Batman, riding their bike, having a birthday party, just normal lives, exactly like our videos. And the love and parental care and concern just jump out at you through these photos and videos. And Shiri, the mom, and 4-year-old Ariel and 9-month-old Kfir were taken hostage alive. And we have this is a still from the video that Hamas sent of, they were taken by a different organization, doesn't matter, but that the organization sent of the day that they were taking, of the exact time that they were taken captive. And so they were taken captive alive, and they were killed in captivity. And the father, Yarden, was kept separately and returned to Israel in one of the deals. So it's all horrible, but I brought them for a certain reason. As a trauma therapist, I just can't get over the fact that what the governments were busy doing, instead of tearfully apologizing to the remaining family members, was to fight publicly over whose fault it was, splashing gory details all over the internet and using this poor family as a pawn. How wrong is that? So what do we do about it? We have evidence-based treatments. So the first line treatment for PTSD in youth, of course, is trauma-focused CBT interventions. There's prolonged exposure, TF-CBT, CT-PTSD, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is really important. It's recommended for young people who do not engage and do not respond to trauma-focused CBT interventions, and medication is recommended as a symptomatic adjuvant, not as a solution to the problem. There's much more to say, but it's not the purpose of the talk, so we'll leave it to a different talk. And as always with children, family interventions are crucially important. And I brought a few examples here. The 3 triangles of pain is not very well known and very helpful. I really recommend that. There are 2 main things that I'd like to stress regarding therapy in PTSD in children for these types of events. So one is that children at risk are those who do not talk about what happened and don't process it, especially if they were frozen and helpless during the event. And this happens for different reasons. We know because of shame, because sometimes there's a pre-existing inhibited temperament or shyness. Sometimes there's an adult environment that is not psychologically minded and not conducive to talking about it. But these are the kids that we need to follow and watch out for and maybe treat later. But overall, children are flexible and resilient, and it's important to also let the natural processes of healing take place, and we don't have to intervene immediately and for everyone. So I spoke with Professor Kermit Katz, it's this lady here, who is a social worker and professor at Tel Aviv University and deputy, and now I think she's the CEO already of Haruv Institute, that is the one treating all the kid hostages who came back from Gaza. And she told me about the evidence-based therapies that they're implementing. She told me about being attuned to the children, regardless of where the therapists are themselves emotionally. She told me about guiding the children in processing events, also through somatosensory techniques that they're using, emotionally guiding them through meaning making. She told me we were on top of it with our best therapist. We were really trying our best, but these kids, they're just deteriorating because the trauma is ongoing. Nobody feels safe. She also told me about 2 young girls, orphans, both orphaned in this war, one Jewish and one Bedouin, which means Muslim, who became best friends and really supported each other through a therapy group that they held. So although her words were saying nothing we do helps, her mere holding presence and the presence of many other mental health professionals who immediately came to support from all over the world made me hopeful. There are a lot of compassionate people in this world. I do have a bit of connections in Gaza. In 2014, I collaborated with Dr. Abdelaziz Thabet, and we applied for a grant together, centering on the notion that preventing dissociation and increasing self-efficacy during a trauma can prevent the development of PTSD. And we also hope that the implicit message of similarity between kids, the same thing helps everybody, would expose the absurdity of the violence that the 2 nations were inflicting on each other. The funding and agency that we applied for was called Grand Challenges Canada, and the submission included a video clip. And that means that I can show you the video clip from 10 years ago right now. Oh, no, wait. 3. Hello, my name is Dr. Gilly Adler-Neveau, and I'm a child psychiatrist from Israel.
I am Dr. Abdelaziz David. I'm child and adolescent psychiatrist from Palestine.
Unfortunately, our region, the Middle East, is abundant with psychological trauma.
And as a consequence of this trauma, many children have post-traumatic stress disorder.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is unique within the DSM psychiatric diagnosis. It does not include only symptoms, but also the trigger for the disorder, the trauma, and most importantly, the reaction to the trigger, helplessness and disorganization. Research evidence shows that helpless and disorganized behavior while the trauma is occurring predicts the development of PTSD. We would like to introduce an intervention which helps prevent the psychological aftermath of physical trauma.
אנחנו קצת נוגעים בדבר המאיים הזה. גם יש פה עובדה, עכשיו מסוכן קצת בחוץ, אנחנו צריכים להתגונן. אני נותן אישור ולגיטימציה לפחד שלי ולתגובות הגוף שלי.
Imagine both Palestinian and Israeli children singing the same healing tune that will protect them from further psychological sequences of trauma.
A tune that externalizes the villain as the violence. This is the challenge of grand proportions, and we want to take it. So we didn't get the grant. A study with propranolol did. It's much more practical, I agree. Dr. Thabit unfortunately passed away a few years ago of natural causes. He loved the growth mindset. He talked about it endlessly. He studied it. And we had many collaborators, as you could see. But now when I try to reach out, it's very hard to collaborate. This is a clip that I prepared from reputable sources available online. So please forgive my editing. And also pay attention to the subtitles because none of these children speak English.
Що для мене війна?
Війна.
Війна це коли до тебе додому заходять незнайомі тобі люди і кажуть, що тобі треба вийти зі свого дому, а тоді можуть розстріляти тебе. Я не знаю, але я сподіваюся, що це якщо політики не допоняли друг друга і з-за цього помирають люди. Війна – це коли ти собі спокійно живеш, але приходять якісь типі, долбойоби і починають бомбити твою країну. صرت أحكي لها أنا كانت تقول لي أنت كنت أقول لها لا أنا أهلي ما موتوش أهلي ضايلين موجودين كنت أقول لهم أنتوا كذابين بتكذبوا عليا هم مش مستشهدين ولا شيء بعيدان يتفعلون يوم السابع نتخيل جودة أخونا تعطيل وتصيروا بس يبان كتشف.
Was that the last message from her? Do you think about her a lot?
No.
What do you think? What do you miss the most?
شاسينو ميدي بام مش متذكرة ولا إيش صار ما كنتش فاكرة اسمي ما كنتش أنا فاكرة مقدر إيش ولا شيء بس إنه متذكرة إني أنا أظني شفت قدامي أبويا قبل المستشفى كان إنه يدللني كتير يجيب لنا الأغراض كتير يصورني وأنا صغيرة فإنه كلها من اللي بالشارع استشهدت أمي استشهدت وأبويا استشهد وأخويا وليد عمره 8 سنين استشهد وستي أم أبويا وستي أم أمي.
It's Lisa, a 13-year-old from Kyiv.
Я не можу навіть їздити на могилу до тата, хоч вже й пройшло більше півроку, але я не можу.
On the surface, Hannah seems to be a happy teenager.
В душі в мене такий ураган, когда погиб папа, мне хотелось самой пойти туда, взять какого-то военного с той стороны и просто над ним, грубо говоря, поиздеваться. Так как издевались над ним, ну. כולם בקבוצות קורס, בדרך היה גם הרבה גופות מסביבנו ודברים שילדים לא צריכים לראות. מלא בתים הרוסים, זה היה קצת מפחיד. אז כשראיתי דברים קצת מפחידים, אז אמרתי, קטע הזה אני צריכה לעצום את העיניים.
Were you able to? Did you need to know?
גם בשלבים מסוימים, אני אומר לעצמי, זה סתם סיוט, לצמוד את עצמי, תן לי איזה סתירה וזה, אני אתברר מזה. אני אעשה את זה ולא זה. احنا مش زي ولاد الناس لساتنا مش عارفة مقارنة شبهي بيعملوا فينا يعني يعني أكيد إنه الناس بيقدروش يطلعوا أهاليهم، وأنا كمان أول مرة أحس إن أمي مش جنبيا وأبويا مش جنبيا. أنا ليش ما روحتش معهم؟ أنا كان نفسي أروح الجنة، نتحدد أنا وياهم في الجنة. ليش أنا هيك صار معي؟
Війна це зло. Війна це смерть.
Потеря.
Це марна трата часу, марна трата людей, марна трата всього просто. Війна це, не знаю, навіщо вона.
Yeah, so I don't know what it's for either. Did you notice which child was from which nation? I really hope you didn't, and I hope you were trying to. Does it matter? So as a trauma therapist, I'm furious at the people breaking our children and then handing them over for us to fix, with very little funding, by the way. Medicine is and has always been also about prevention, being proactive, not just reactive. There's no reason that in the 21st century, when we have access to unbelievable technologies that make the world into a global village, that people would still kill each other with any kind of legitimacy. So I prepared a quick animation to clarify and emphasize Aaron Beck's point. So this is, as you all know, a Venn diagram. Let's say that the two circles represent two different nationalities. Let's say one is Israel and one is Palestine, and they're divided by culture, language, religion, borders, all that. But still, we're all human, and we do have things in common, and that's represented by the overlap. And the divide between the nations is here vertical. Pay attention to that. So we know just from this talk that we have at least a few redhead children who were harmed in this conflict and did no harm themselves to no one. We also know that their family were harmed and harmed no one. And so we know that they are not the enemy. So far, so good. Now let's expand this a little bit. Surely on both sides of the border, there are many children who harmed no one and many of their family members who harmed no one. How many of the population on both sides of the border just want to live their lives in peace and harm no one? I would say most. I'm certain that, like me, as mental health providers who live in this wonderful multicultural city, you know that we have so much more in common. We're mothers, we're fathers, we're spouses, we're friends. We cook, we have hobbies, we have so many identities. Why, in times of war, does nationality become the most dominant identity and define us? We watch movies. Very few of us from all nationalities are rooting for the villain when we watch them, right? We all want to be on the side of good. We're not perfect, we're not angels, but we're not the devil either. The vast majority of us just want to live our life in peace. So who cares who's who? Don't you feel empathy for all of them? So maybe the vertical divide between us, between nationalities, is wrong. Maybe the divide should be horizontal. On one side, us people who would never hurt a fly, us people who love the richness and diversity that other cultures bring into our lives. And on the other side, the minority, and they are a minority, they're represented here in these red crescents, of terrorists, of leaders who instigate violence. And I didn't arrive at this conclusion alone. Remember Aaron Beck, Daniel Kahneman, a cognitive psychologist who received the Nobel Prize, spoke about the same thing, and he's in our reading list too, Thinking Fast and Slow. So remember Occam's razor. The simplest of therapies, CBT, explains it very clearly. Two main cognitive distortions play a part here. Overgeneralization, so instead of a group of terrorists, a whole nation is blamed. and confirmation bias, paying attention only to the information that validates what we already believe in. And this highlights and amplifies every negative thing that the other does, right? And so on social media, it adds logs to the fire, and it speeds up the snowballing of hate. Confirmation bias never mentions the majority, the sane, balanced voices from both sides. And you can see that at times of war, these voices are mainly silent, but they're there. So these cognitive distortions prevent people from realizing that it's not a whole nation that they are at war with. How could it be, seriously? So I don't have answers. I have questions. I have reflections, wishes, dreams. And this is my thought. This is my taking care of the sense. Murder is the most horrible crime across all societies, and no end justifies it. Murderers are punished in all societies, right? Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I keep wondering why that is not the case for leaders. Why isn't this rule, which is clear within cultures, not clear between cultures? My only answer is that there's no one above them to reinforce it. There's no kindergarten teacher to redirect them to use their words and not their hands. So shouldn't we expect from the most capable in our societies, the ones we choose to lead us, at least what we expect from the least capable? Shouldn't we expect them to be better problem solvers? So sure, the problems are super complex, but I do know that interpersonal problems can be quite complex. Raj, don't stop me right now. And also intra-societal problems, but we never solve these by killing each other. So again, Occam's razor. If we teach kindergartners to use their voice and not their hands, for sure, we can demand the same of our leaders. It is that simple. So leaders of countries who instigate war just because they can, because there's no one to punish them, right? That's why they do it, because there's no one to punish them. But aren't we above them? Aren't they representing us? So I'm wondering what would have happened if all the people who are out demonstrating against injustice, all the people who are feeling the pain of others, all the people who just want war to stop, had not fallen into this thinking trap of overgeneralization and hate. I'm wondering what would have happened if people around the world had been filling the streets with slogans not against each other, but against all leaders who instigate war. It's counterintuitive for the emotional reptilian brain, but it would have solved the problem. I think you can't hear that. We do our crowd footage, but there's a lot of noise in my side. These are Israelis demonstrating against the Israeli government. It's happening every Saturday. That's tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands. In Gaza, demonstrating against there's a lot of noise in my office, and a lot of I feel empowerment doing this. So Raj, I can see you here, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but did you give me 90 minutes? Did we say 90 minutes?
You can have a couple more minutes if you need to.
So I'd like to start all over again. And Raj, I have a lot of respect for the land acknowledgement, really. But look where a land acknowledgement got us in the Middle East. Maybe it's better just to acknowledge that the land belonged to itself and no one, and that would prevent a few wars. But I'd like to start all over again, okay? So I would like to start my talk with the following and urge you to begin your talks and every conversation about the war with this acknowledgement. As mental health providers, we acknowledge the evidence-based, irreversible, and devastating impact of war on individuals and humanity. Our commitment begins with prevention. Therefore, we vehemently denounce the instigation of violence, whether within or between societies. While we may not wield weapons, we wield the power of our voices and actions. We pledge to tirelessly denounce any leader who chooses the path of war. It is always opposed to the best interest of their people. We will amplify our message, speaking out against war and its atrocities until it resonates throughout society, revealing the instigation of war as a despicable act of weakness. And this is just photos I took from Google Maps. From the dates are predating the war. This is the beach in Gaza, Kiev, and this is Kibbutz Be'eri, one that was the hardest hit, one of the hardest hit in October 7th. Questions?
Thank you for that. That's a very powerful presentation, and I know you put so much effort and thought into this. So thank you for doing that. And the feedback, a lot of people have said it's an excellent presentation and very thoughtful and in today's times. And the comments are coming through in so many ways. So one of the questions maybe more on a theoretical side of things I wanted to ask you was when you look at acute settings of whether it's war or natural disasters or stuff, there's always is there a role for acute therapy? Like, there's a question that, should we have some type of, people do go to these settings to support survivors, but is there some evidence-based therapies for acute treatment in war settings or in natural disasters from your experience in this area?
Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of back and forth about debriefing. So debriefing, which is just gathering the people around and helping process in a group, had very bad data for it initially, that it was actually creating harm. And I think it was because sometimes it wasn't done correctly. And as I said, it's always helpful to be engaged and process. So I do think it's helpful for people to feel that there's goodness in the world and that there are therapists that are there to help. But I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I don't think it should be forced on people. And I think that there's a lot of natural healing that takes place. So we need, like I said, we need to watch out for people who need us. And also with PTSD, there's acute stress disorder considered within a month. And then usually within 3 months, that's when we see the majority of people who maintain PTSD symptoms right after a trauma. A lot of people have PTSD symptoms. So we need to watch out and maybe intervene a bit later and not pathologize everything.
Thank you. The other question, I know you work in different arenas, but this question of it's people are watching this. Kids are watching a lot of what's happening in the world, like on television and other mediums. What are your thoughts on the impact of that in terms of precipitating or some type of long-term vulnerability in child and adolescents or even older adults?
Yeah, so I think it's two questions. One, what is this horrible age of war that we suddenly fell into? I think it did start with Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and that is completely not good. It's causing generational irreversible trauma right now, and is just horrible. We can't do anything about that, unfortunately. Now, the second part of your question is what about media and social media? And I think that the answer is complex because it depends who we're talking about. It depends on the child developmental age. And it depends also on how curious they are and how much they want to know. So I think the first thing is to see who is the child. There's no blanket statement for everything. Who is the child that you're dealing with? And I do think it's important not to hide things from children. So according to the developmental age, show them what they can process and what they can understand. And it's better to be there with a parent they can talk about these things with than just doing it on their own. So that is the overall. See who you're dealing with, what their developmental level is. Are they curious? Are they interested to know? And if yes, don't hide it from them and be with them when you're watching it and at the right developmental level.
Thank you, Dr. Nevo. I mean, this is, as I said, the feedback has been very, very positive. Everyone is so gracious for you, really thinking very thoughtful of a very, very challenging area and really presenting it in a very thoughtful manner. I want to thank you again for doing that. If there's any other questions that people had, they can obviously send it to Anne-Marie, and Anne-Marie can pass it on to Dr. Nevo, and then she can get back to them. So thank you everyone for joining today. We really appreciate it. Hope you'll have a good summer, and we will rejoin in September. So
I just wanted to thank you as well, Raj, and thank you for inviting me. And my email is here if anybody is interested. I'm happy to talk.
thanks, Dr. Nevo. As I said, you do some incredible work clinically in so many other areas. So thank you for agreeing to present and represent Michael Karen. So thank you again. So take care, everyone. We will see you after the summer. So take care. Bye.